All right, President Trump and Governor Walz had a phone conversation today. They both said it went well. They talked about working together. Walz even saying the president agreed to look into reducing the number of federal agents in that state. It is kind of a 180, given that Trump repeatedly blamed Governor Walz for all of the unrest in Minneapolis. It also appears to be a shift away from Attorney General Pam Bondi's initial demands for access to both Minnesota voter rolls and public assistance data. We're going to say appears because who knows what happens next. Joining us, former acting director of ICE, John Sandweg, and former assistant chief counsel for ICE, Veronica Cardenas. All right, John, I feel like, just roll the tape from a couple weeks ago. Let's talk about another ICE-involved shooting or Border Patrol-involved shooting in this case. When you watch the video, what stands out to you?
Well, Katie, I think, first of all, just that distinction right there is critically important. That strikes me as a very important part of this story. Although it can seem technical, the difference between ICE and Border Patrol agents, it is not technical in terms of the difference in their training. The Border Patrol agents are trained at a different academy than ICE agents. They're trained for a completely different operating environment. And culturally, based on where they operate, primarily in the southern border, in the dead of night, sometimes, right, encountering drug cartel mules at times, they do have a higher level of aggression because of the high threat, the high risk environment in which they operate. A thing that has concerned me since day one and concerned other former ICE officials I've been talking to is this idea of pulling Border Patrol agents up off the border and putting them in an urban environment where now they're confronting protesters exercising their First Amendment rights, something that they just are not experienced with and certainly had very limited training about. You just don't encounter that at the border. And Katie, what strikes me is that aggression we saw with which prior to the actual shooting. Now, there needs to be an investigation, but there's no question in my mind when you look at the events leading up to the moments before the shot, you do see a very high degree of aggressiveness by these agents in dealing with these protesters. And that just reinforces for me those concerns I've had since day one about use of Border Patrol agents. What
is the deal with that woman being shoved in that way? Yeah. And then the pepper spray being brought out so quickly. Is there any scenario where a shove like that is justified?
Katie, there may be, but I will tell you that it needs to be a key part of this investigation. What was the legal basis for the arrest, right? I mean, again, the problem here, Katie, is it's a fine line between what constitutes impeding a federal law enforcement officer and committing a crime and what is protected First Amendment activity. But when you have agents who are not experienced in understanding that line or not trained on where those lines are as extensively and don't deal with it in their normal operating environment, where they come from an environment where you have to have maximum compliance because of the risks that you face, it is a dangerous situation. And quickly, Katie, I have to tell you, this is not something that should be lost on any leaders at DHS. You don't need to work at the department long to know this. And that's why I do blame the leadership here for deploying these Border Patrol agents in the first place. I've had agents tell me that in their mind, it was a question of when this was going to happen, not if, just by virtue of these extensive deployments of these Border Patrol agents and just their unsuitability for this operating environment.
Veronica, the administration keeps saying that Minnesota is not cooperating. It's not complying with federal law enforcement activities. They're not helping them get out the worst of the worst. The state jails operator has said that's not true. We are complying. But among the county jail operations, Hennepin County does not work with ICE. The head of Hennepin County jails has said that the cooperation means that undocumented immigrants don't report crimes or are nervous about reporting crimes. And his belief is that that is more dangerous for the community than the cooperation with the federal government. In light of that, and in light of what we've seen here, I guess, what do you think of that? I mean, does the administration have a point? Is this something that should be reconsidered? Or does the county jail, the Hennepin County Jail, have their own point? Is it both?
I think that when we're looking at these investigations, when we're looking at this enforcement, there's always more success when state and local officials can cooperate with ICE or with CBP or with just DHS. To have that, there has to be a level of trust. And so once that trust is eroded, then local officials are less likely to cooperate with DHS. And we're seeing that, and that trust has eroded over time. We have seen that this administration has promised, right, the worst of the worst, but when you look at the numbers of who is actually being detained, it tells a different story. There are people that do not have any crimes, people who are showing up and abiding by the process that this administration and just immigration laws in general have told people that they have to go through. And so in this situation, because of where we are now, because of the shift that we've seen, CBP moving from the border into the interior, from ICE now, patrolling and having jurisdiction now over citizens who are observers, who are protesting, I would say that the local officials have every right to not trust this administration.
Well, let's bring in former Director of ICE, Sarah Saldana, to the conversation as well. Sarah, one of the things that kind of gets lost in this conversation is immigration reform, period, congressional immigration reform. And you can do all these ICE operations in the interior, but ultimately what is most necessary is Congress to step in and to get an agreement in place for how to deal with folks. President Trump said early on that he wanted his immigration policy to have heart. We have not seen that heart that he claimed to want to have here. Is there a way for Congress to step in and to fix this?
Oh my, Katie, you don't ask for much, do you? I'm afraid that this is an extraordinary time right now that does cry out for this. I'm so glad you brought it up. I speak about this quite often, and that is one of the reasons we have this friction between the community and ICE is because when the administration changes, the priorities and the goals of the mission change. The mission is still valid. It's still important to the national security of the country, but unfortunately, when you have such a dramatic swing as you did with the Trump administration's pretty much take everybody, low-hanging fruit, criminals, take anybody you encounter and go find anybody, try to manufacture encounters in any event, even on the street, then you have this tremendous problem of where, you don't meet our values. You don't meet what we believe is important in immigration enforcement. So, yes, if we could have that Gang of Eight back, if we could have somebody who says there are areas where we can agree, and it is not essential that we pick up every person that has some kind of entry that is not in compliance with the law, and instead prioritize and use money well. Just because Congress has authorized you billions and billions of dollars, I thought I had a lot with $6 billion and 20,000 employees when I was there. But now we've got this extraordinary price tag, 60, 70 billion, and it is not, this effort does not require that. If you could get comprehensive immigration and reform where you become more rational, more pro-business, more community-friendly approach to immigration enforcement. That's what I'd like to see, but it is almost, I just don't see that people stepping up to do this in a manner that needs to be done.
I guess what's the reason for that? Because, I mean, I've heard depressing things over the years. One of the most depressing thing I've heard from a government official, and this was a high-ranking one, was that on the subject of immigration, it's never going to get solved because it's too good of a political issue. And they say this on both sides. It's too good of a political issue to run on, to campaign on. It's effective, it's motivating, it gets people out. And solving it, actually having a solution and having immigration reform and less chaos is just not good. Not good for people who want to run for office. Have you heard that?
I'm afraid
do you agree with that?
Yes, I do. And I do look at both sides and their responsibility and participation in not moving the ball here. You've really hit on it when you say that we really need to get both sides to the table to talk about these issues. But we have become so entrenched as the American public in not solving, not requiring our elected officials to solve this problem, to come to the table, to consider the American public first before your own political interests. You've got the senator in Texas, John Cornyn, who has supported me in the past with respect to becoming U.S. attorney, and then a director of ICE, at least introducing me to the Senate committee when I was nominated. But I just, how can he risk looking at all fairly at the question of whether we allow some immigrants to stay in this country and work towards perhaps even possibly citizenship? It doesn't have to be, but as a possibility. I just don't see that happening as much as I respect Senator Cornyn.